Everybody, Keep7 here, back with another Magic the Gathering Arena video, and before today's video, before we get into the card discussion, I just wanted to thank everybody who came out to watch the Extra Life stream on November 7th. A lot of it was family and friends, but we raised $900, which is awesome, for the Connecticut Children's Medical Center, so that's really awesome. I'm really proud of everybody who came, swung by, donated, most importantly. So that was really awesome. Woo Merklord, I think. If you're watching, thanks so much for coming by, man. It was cool to talk to you. I was a little inebriated by the end of the stream, so I apologize for that if I was slurring my words and making no sense. But thank you so much, and it's really great to hear that there are people out there that are actually watching the MTG content and enjoying it. So yeah, thanks everybody for showing up. It was a lot of fun. We streamed for 17 and a half hours and raised $900. So really proud of everybody, and I think it was a really great effort. So as for today's video, today we're going to be talking about Village Rites. Village Rites is a card that was popularized, or very popular, came out in M21 and became very popular in the Rakdos Sacrifice lists. The Mayhem Devil, Priest of the Forgotten God lists that were arguably one of the best aggressive decks in the format. So it was very popular pre-rotation. Post-rotation, obviously, we lost Mayhem Devil, we lost Priest of the Forgotten Gods. The Rakdos Sacrifice lists, or Rakdos Sacrifice as an archetype, became somewhat impossible to play, and especially, during the Omnath meta, this card was seeing absolutely no play, neither was Rakdos Sacrifice. And then after the Omnath ban, the Rakdos mid-range decks became somewhat popular and powerful, and people started playing those. And it was seeing some success in tournaments. And then recently, people have been making small adjustments to the Rakdos mid-range list, and, subbing in different cards like Woe Strider, and cards like Claim the Firstborn, A Crowan War, and things of that nature, to kind of give Rakdos Sacrifice a comeback. But it's coming back less like the cheap aggressive list that we saw pre-rotation. Now it's just a modified version of the Rakdos mid-range lists that we're seeing, just with cards, again, like Woe Strider and Claim the Firstborn and things, yoink effects and sacrifice synergies. So we're seeing kind of like a Rakdos mid-range sacrifice list coming around recently. Big streamers like Croxah have been playing him and advocating for him, saying that they're pretty good. So anyway, so the card itself, let's talk about the card in a vacuum. Village Rites is a 1 black mana instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature and draw 2 cards. So at the very least, you're paying this card, the mana cost of this card, potentially a creature that you have paid a mana cost for, to draw 2 cards, which in a vacuum I think is pretty bad value. However, there are obviously so many situations where this card can be used, obviously, outside of, if you think about it, outside of a vacuum. If your creature is being targeted, it is the target of removal. If you're using yoink effects to take your opponent's creatures and sacrificing them instead, it just makes you think a lot about what you're paying for to make this card worth it. And I think that's really, at the end of the day, what it really boils down to is this card good or bad? And what it really depends on is what you paid in order to cast it. So there are really generally just 2 situations where you're going to be casting this card, and you're either casting it and targeting something that you control, or you're casting it and targeting something that you took from your opponent using Claim the Firstborn or Crowan War, some type of yoink effect, and you're sacrificing a permanent that they controlled. That you will control temporarily, but for more or less, it's something that they controlled and you're taking it and sacrificing it. So those are really the 2 situations. So in one situation, you're sacrificing your own creature, and I think that's where this card is at its very worst, because you're paying the card itself, you're paying the mana cost of the card, you're paying the card of the creature card that you casted earlier, and potentially even you have to factor in that you paid a mana cost for that creature. There can be an argument to be made saying, if that creature already generated value for you in some way when you casted it, you can kind of discount that value, that, but more or less you did pay a mana cost for that creature, regardless of the value it generated for you. So you're paying 2 cards, the mana cost of the creature that you casted and the mana cost of this card for 2 cards, which I think is very bad value-wise. Not very good. Obviously, it is dependent on the mana cost of the creature that you casted, but, even if it's a 1 mana creature, that's 2 mana, 2 cards for 2 cards. And if you compare that to something like Into the Story, which can be 4 mana, draw 4 cards, it's 1 mana per card, it beats the living shit out of this. There are obviously situations where targeting your own creature value-wise is better. Like if your Woe Strider is the target of a Bone Crusher Giant, and it's going to die anyway, using this card to sacrifice and get two cards out of the deal is not the worst thing in the world. I think that increases the card's value overall, but still, you paid for that Woe Strider, and it was going to die anyway, but I still think that there is better value to be seen from this card. So, and then the last situation that I'll bring up is Croxah. Croxah is obviously a great target for this card and will increase the value of this card in that, when you cast Croxah from your hand, he's going to get sacrificed anyway. So playing this alongside him, I think increases the value a little bit, but, it's an instant that you're playing at sorcery speed. So that kind of decreases the value a bit. I think it's better to hold this and sack a creature that you think is going to get removed. I think that value is better than sacrificing, Croxah and using this on your turn, committing mana to your turn to draw 2 more cards. But, in certain situations, just a draw 2 on your turn could be crucial. Maybe you're digging for something, but overall, I think targeting your own creature, obviously, there are a lot of arguments to be made. Is it worth it? In some cases, I think it kind of evens itself out. If if your own thing is going to die, you get 2 cards out of the deal. Not so bad. Targeting your own Croxah, it's getting sacrificed anyway, not so bad. But just straight up sacrificing one of your creatures to draw 2 if you're in dire straits and you need to find some sort of top deck to deal with something that's on the board. Obviously, that's this card at its worst. This card at its best is when it's being used in conjunction with Claim the Firstborn or some type of yoink effect that will pull a permanent from your opponent's side over, it has to be a creature, but will pull a creature from your opponent's board or side of the board over to your side of the board so that you can sacrifice it and draw the 2 by using this card. And that's this card at its best, when you are sacrificing something your opponent controls to draw 2. So it's essentially removal and not necessarily card advantage, but card draw. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you do end up paying more. Like if you're playing the Akroan War and this, you're paying, what is that? It's 4 mana for the Akroan War and then 5 mana for this. So you're emptying a lot for a removal spell. That's 5 mana for the Akroan War to take something, and then you have to, either use this on your turn or their turn at some point. Maybe after you've used their creature and gotten in for some damage or something, or maybe you're just chump blocking, who knows, but you are committing more mana to use this as a removal spell. And obviously the best use of this is with Claim the Firstborn, because it's 2 very cheap spells. Claim the Firstborn, you pay 1 card, 1 red mana, you pay a second card, this card, and 1 black mana to sacrifice a creature, which is great removal, especially if you use it on something that your opponent dumped a lot of mana into, a la Lovestruck Beast, Scoot Swarm, stuff like that. 3 big 3 mana creatures that are going to be high impact that you can just simply remove and get 2 cards out of the deal is this card, I think, at its best. And yeah, overall, I think in a nutshell, that's the card. At its best, it's removal and card draw. At its worst, it's just, sacrificing your own creature, draw 2, and paying a lot more than you think you are. And the one thing I want to bring up that I find fascinating about this card, and that I really, I think a lot of people discount, is when you think about the cost to cast spells, a lot of people don't think about paying the card itself as a cost to cast the spell. They just think of things in terms of mana cost and value. What they're paying versus what they're getting, which when you read this card, you think I'm just paying 1 mana, 1 creature, drawing 2 cards. But you are paying the cards themselves. You're paying the card Village Rites itself to cast this spell, and you're technically paying the creature card that you may have casted. Of course, you can sacrifice a token, but let's just say, you know, for sake of argument, that you are sacrificing a creature that you casted, and it is a card on the board. So you are sacrificing 2 cards in addition to the mana costs and yada yada. So I think when a lot of people see this card, they initially, or when newer players see this card, they think it's a fantastic card because they just see draw 2, and they think with the sacrifice, with the sacrifice synergy, they just think it's a fantastic card. But in reality, it's not. It's not that great of a card. It can be a very great card, but in most situations, it's not. And it really depends on what you paid for it and how you used it. And I think I think that's kind of just what's fascinating about the card is kind of an argument for when it's good and when it's bad, and what value is worth it and when the value of it is maybe not so worth it. Obviously, a lot of what I've said is kind of blanket statements. There are a lot of different scenarios and situations where you're going to be using this card, and I broke it down to generally just 2 situations. But I could sit here and talk about this card for days, and I'd love to. I'd love to discuss this card, especially with other people, and just see what they think about the card and stuff like that. But it's just me and a microphone here, so I'm not gonna sit here for 10 hours and talk about Village Rites. But it's a fascinating card. It's seeing a little bit of a comeback, so I thought it warranted a little bit of a discussion. So for those of you out there who maybe want to play the Rakdos mid-range sacrifice decks that are going around out there, this is going to be obviously an easy 4 of. It's a common card, so if you are playing with those Rakdos mid-range lists and maybe you want to pivot into the sacrifice archetype a little bit, I would highly recommend it. Sacrifice is always just kind of a fun way to play the game. And I think that, this card, again, in conjunction with things like Claim the Firstborn and Necroan War, is just absolute gas. And then there are some times where I think this card really falls flat. But yeah, I think that's just, I think it's really cool that there's a card like this exists, where it's just base level seems just a very simple, easy to understand card, but when you really think about it, it can just be so, black and white, two-faced, and just kind of like, is it good and is it bad? I don't know. It's awesome. It's why I love the game. Thinking about, just stuff like this. So anyway, that is my breakdown of Village Rites. That is the card discussion for Village Rites. Let me know what you think of the card yourself. Let me know if you are playing Rakdos mid-range, sacrifice decks, if you're enjoying them, how you're doing. I've seen people get pretty high, on the ladder playing those kinds of decks. So let me know how you're doing. And yeah, again, everybody who joined the November 7th Extra Life stream, that was awesome. I will be streaming, as much as I can, mostly weekends. But, looking forward to making more card discussions and stuff like that. So keep an eye out for that. Thanks everybody so much, and thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one.